Uh, Basically, what I want to start with is like, I think you need no introduction as such because anyone who is into the music space or who is into the crypto space definitely knows about you, and anybody who is into the intersection of both, like, then it's like he definitely knows about you, right?
I don't
So,
know. It's just maybe. I've been around for a long time, and I've been in this intersection of crypto and music now for quite some time.
right. And I see,
Properly, I'd say 5 years properly.
yeah, and I see you are very active on Twitter Spaces and very active on the TokenTraxx community itself. So it's really nice to see you speaking, learn from you. So that's really great, and I definitely hope that we will know you. And if they don't, I believe they will get to know about you and your insights from this conversation. So
Absolutely.
yeah, really happy to welcome you on this.
Thank you. Great to be here. I appreciate you offering to let me natter,
Yeah,
as we say in the UK. Having a natter.
yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. So I'll just start off with my first question with you, and that is more or less to do with like if you could tell me about what is music NFT company or what in a sense is a music NFT to anybody who doesn't understands this, and post that we could like also discuss how does the NFT help in the music industry. So, but before we start, I would like to build up a base for people who are new to the like new to the crypto space or who know NFT but don't know what NFT is in sense of music. So that would be really great.
Yeah, I think that the thing to bear in mind is that the technology, whether it's an NFT or anything else for that matter, is just a tool with which we do as human beings what human beings do. And one of the things that human beings does is create, and one of the things that we create is music. And so looking at music as a thing, first and foremost, before you get into what's a music NFT is probably the best way of then looking at how that technology applies to that thing. And
Right,
music really falls into the music industry
right,
is falls into two kind of distinct areas. Music has to travel, otherwise the person that's making the music is just sitting in their room or
right,
in their cave or on their rock or by their tree or whatever, singing a song or humming to themselves or whatever. And so over many centuries, we as human beings have developed different ways of making music with different instruments, and which of course always people forget, musical instruments are technology.
right,
And the music, and so using musical instruments, and then obviously a couple of hundred years ago through recording music and the different mediums with which recorded music found themselves, from first of all with vinyl, then cassette, then CD, now streaming, and obviously in between that was digital downloads. All the time music has to travel in a product of some kind. It all started with
right,
sheet music, and then, as I said, recorded music. And so understanding how music needs to travel, then you can then understand how we listen to music. And um, take a piece of music that was written 200 years ago, but Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, it's no different today than it was when it was written 200 odd years ago. It's still the same piece of music. It's recorded and it's played by many different orchestras using sheet music and recording equipment, and it's played through whatever streaming, radio, you go see concerts, whatever. But the music hasn't changed. So the music industry was built on products that
right,
allowed music to travel. It started, as I said, with sheet music, and then it went into all these different mediums. And the music has always been part of, attached to a product. And invariably, the music industry has found a way to charge you more for the product, not necessarily the music itself. One of the biggest problems, which we can explore a little bit later on, is the value of music. What is the value of music in society? And the value of music over the years has been pegged by different sort of features, whether you were going to a concert, whether you were going to buy vinyl, whether you were, listening for free on the radio, and so on and so forth. Music is the listening of music. So music itself is put into two different boxes. The first one is listening to music.
Right.
Listening to music is what we call either a lean forward or a lean back experience. When you lean forward, it means you're actually actively involved in the choice of that music.
Right.
So imagine you're looking at Spotify or YouTube or whatever, and you're making a choice about what music you're listening to.
Right.
The lean back experience actually is the medium with which we actually listen to more music, really, because very rarely in this day and age do we actually choose the music we listen to, because a lot of the time we're listening to music without actually realizing it. We're watching TV, we're streaming music, we're in a mall, we're in Starbucks, we're in we're on some kind of platform or whatever, and music's just playing.
Right.
Lean back experience of music listening is when music comes at you, but you haven't necessarily made that choice. So those two experiences are very much part of the listening experience. Arguably, the thing that has happened over the last 20 years, i.e., streaming, has created probably the best. It's difficult to see how you could improve it, really. Listening experience. And with sort of add ons like Shazam, which allow you obviously to recognize music. I mean, I can be in a club, I can hear a track I like, I can Shazam it, I can send it to you, you can send it to your friend, we can put it in
Right.
playlists, we can share that. That's a really great experience. And I don't think anybody can it's difficult to work out how you can better that experience if unless potentially making it more
Right.
like more social in its kind of concept, because music is a social thing.
Right.
So that's the first concept around music, is listening to music, right?
Right.
The second concept around music is actually everything else. And when I say everything else, you think, well, hang on, what else is there? Okay, so there is going to gigs, there is meet and greets, there is merchandise, there is um, many different sort of areas of that an artist has that you might buy into. Gigs is an obvious one, merchandise is an obvious one, but there are lots of different things that you can tap into as a musician that might be something that people would want to be around and be closer to. And that experience of music is the thing that I think in this day and age we have the ability to maybe expand upon and build upon.
Right.
Back in 2000, and I think it was 11 or 12, when Netflix launched, Spotify had already been in the market for 3 years, and they were both 10.99 a month for streaming, right? Now, Spotify's just put their price up last year. They're now 11.99. Netflix is 17.99. So, and Netflix is one streaming platform, of which there are many, many visual stream platforms, of Apple Music, Apple TV, and
Right.
Prime, and and so on and so on and so on and so on.
Right.
And if you wanted to watch all the TV and films that you were out there, you'd have to spend about $100 a month. And yet we have this all you can eat, all you want to listen to experience of 120 million tracks on streaming platforms, way more on YouTube, for
Right.
around about 10.99 a month. And in fact, most people don't even know they're paying
Right.
for streaming services. They get it bundled in through their internet and their mobile phones. So the value of music has gone out the window. People do not value music anymore.
Right.
So let's fast forward then to the question you asked. What is a music NFT? A music NFT is a new form, or an NFT rather, is a new form of provenance. It's a digital receipt that allows you to prove something, whatever it is attached to
Right.
or combined with.
Right.
Um, the idea of providence and ownership is actually going back to ages old concepts of ownership. We've
Right.
been in a place in the last 15, 20 years where we've rented music, particularly
Right.
in the last 10 years. We stream music where we rent it. We no longer own it. We know, people, yeah, okay, there's a small percentage of people still buy
Right.
CDs and vinyl, so on. But most of the time now people rent music. And as I said, they don't even know they're renting it.
Right.
Prove your allegiance to an artist. One of the things I talked about in the experience of music was meet and greets. What is a meet and greet? A meet and greet is that moment where you get to shake hands with your beloved artist that has done so much for you, that make music that really touches your soul, and
Right.
so on and so on. And you get a selfie and you can post it, and my God, they will start crying, and it's the biggest fucking thing in the world, right?
Right.
That kind of concept of being closer to artists is what we need to expand upon, because we can't encourage people to spend any more money on music. We've already set the value of music. It's 10.99. If you
Right.
want to increase the value of streaming on, say, Spotify, you have to bring in new like features,
Right.
and those feature and but the value of music doesn't change.
Right.
If Spotify brought in some new features and decided to charge me 13.99, I'm buying those features. I'm not buying the value of music. The value of music is 10.99. That's what it's set to. And in fact, arguably, it's free because I
Right.
can go listen to music for free on YouTube or on
Right.
Spotify.
Okay.
Okay, I have to put up with a few ads, but so what? So
Right.
we have taught the general public, we've taught them that the value of music is nothing, is zero.
Right.
That's what the music industry has done. And
Right.
this is a huge problem because
Absolutely.
now we now have to think about what the value of music is. Music NFTs allow us to bring in a new concept, which is to define, or rather to the freedom to choose your own value.
Right.
Freedom to choose your own value, which is something that we've not had in the music industry. We've
Right.
not set our streaming rates. We never set our album rates. We barely can set ticket prices when we do gigs. You
Right.
know, we don't set the royalties that get paid when the music gets used on TV or radio.
Right.
We have very little choice over how
Right.
much we as create music creatives can
Right.
charge the general public.
Right.
And so, the music NFT gives us a load of interesting concepts and ideas about how we can have the freedom to choose our value and say to our fans, here is something that proves that you're a fan and it costs this.
Right. That's really insightful, to be honest, because the way you have like breaking it down about the journey of music and how like it's been completely devalued right now in sense of listening, because that's really true. Because this is what I always had this thought that why do I need to, like, for example, even if I rent it out to Spotify, like I come from a generation where like we can easily download any music from internet, whether you say it legally or illegally, but I have access to that music, and I can listen to that downloaded on my phone. Like I do not even need another software to listen that to. So coming from that generation when like let's say uh, YouTube or Spotify, whatever like subscriptions we talk about, and if they ask enormously large amounts of sums, then sometimes I do feel like that I do not need them because I still have access to my old records, and I can, like, whenever I want I can plug those in and I can listen to those, and that's what my majority of my time I'm listening to, and I do not even need internet to listen to those because it's like one time I've downloaded that. So the journey that you've brought in, like, that makes in a lot of sense, and I feel like though what I'm doing is like not completely ethical in a way, because like I am kind of snatching away the rights of the creators from them, because they could have been paid more if I would have like taken up a subscription from YouTube, Spotify, or whatever we talk about. But in a sense I still feel like that even if I take up that subscription, the use, like, the original creator is not being paid enough, and that I believe is the major reason for distribution channels, labels who are like publishing the, like publishing the creators, marketing them into the channel and helping them become big into the industry. So I completely get that, like how you have broken that down. But what I want to understand more is, like, with this NFT thing, right? Like what I mentioned is like, even if I still want to go that illegal route, for example, if I want to download that, I can still do that, right? So how do we create in a sense for listeners that they should be more ethical and buy that piece of music and actually own it? Because like in the concert it's like they're getting the chance to be with their favorite musicians. They kind of get that vibe in that experience. But like let's say if I'm sitting at my home and I'm plugging in my earphones and I'm listening to the, like, through a normal NFT, how does that create a difference? That's a first question. Second one is, if we can create that sense, how can we market it better? Because I believe any creator who becomes big or who becomes the, like, who sells a chart buster definitely needs a lot of marketing budgets to actually reach there. Like I wouldn't say like you can just write one music or produce one song and then you could be a like you could be completely sold out. It's like it's gonna take time. But the moment you attach yourself to any big label or attach yourself to any of those streaming platforms, the chances of your discoverability increases significantly. So, how do we cater to that marketing challenge that the creators are going to face with this NFT thing coming into the picture? So, those are the two questions.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah,
Um, I think that this, the most fundamental question that you're asking here is how can you use, how can NFTs be part of your armory, your marketing armory? Um, I think the jury's out, to be honest, as to how they can be used. And I think it fundamentally, it comes down to what you are like as an artist. The
right,
most successful artists that are utilizing any technology, whether it's social media
right,
or Web3 technology or anything or streaming or anything like that, work very, very hard.
absolutely,
And they fundamentally do something which is not is as old as the hills, which
right,
is they connect with their fan base in some on some level.
right,
And there is no kind of one size fits all
absolutely,
answer to this.
right,
You have to build a fan base in a very traditional way. Now, the very traditional way is playing concerts when it comes to music.
okay,
So the question becomes who funds the concerts? Now,
oh,
traditionally, the industry has built up on a, a structure which was recorded music funded you to go live. So as
right,
you sold your records or your CDs, and it went on the radio,
right,
and it promoted, and you would go and play gigs, and you'd do a tour,
right,
and you'd go and play gigs in these different places. And if you got bigger, you'd manage to go to other countries and you'd tour there, and you might even get so successful that you end up doing a world tour. But
right,
all of this needs funding
right,
because up to a certain point, doing gigs is not financially viable. You
right,
know, realistically speaking, if you're a four-piece band and you make your own music and you have a band, you have a traditional structure, drums, bass, guitar, keyboards, vocals,
right,
right? If you are a traditional band, you ain't going to make money from touring until you're playing in around about 1,500 to 2,000 seater venues. And
right,
even then, it's tight. Even
right,
then, it's really tight, right? You've got to take a crew with you. Might be a small crew, but you've still got to take a crew with you. One or two people, one to do the sound, maybe one to do the. Anyway, touring costs money.
right,
And so, how do you get to that place where who's funding for the touring? Well,
right,
this has been traditionally what the music industry has been built on. The idea that I think you've got potential. I will invest in you. I'm a
right,
manager. I'm a publisher. I'm a music label.
right,
I'm a rich, investor, whatever. I will give you some money and I'll support you for the first 2 or 3 years of you while you go out, you make music, you learn about your craft, you write songs, you go out and do tours, you get better at writing songs, you get better at performing live, and then slowly but surely you build your fan base until you get to the point where you start to become profitable, right?
right,
Traditionally, that's how the music industry has worked. But the problem with the modern music industry is that streaming doesn't pay because, and it's not just streaming's fault. It's very important that I make this point. Okay. So listen carefully because this is a very important point. A lot of people think that streaming is the problem.
right,
Streaming is part of the problem.
right,
Biggest problem of all is everything about the music industry, right? Everything from the way it's structured, the way that the intellectual property, the way that the gatekeepers keep control over everything, the dominance of major labels, historic catalogs and business practices, contracts rather, and business practices that are completely immoral and one-sided.
right,
And then you throw in a bunch of tech entrepreneurs who are busy raising billions and billions off the back of creative people's
right,
output, right? So it's not just streaming. Don't get me wrong, streaming has a place, and streaming has made has devalued the concept of music, but the industry has allowed tech
right.
companies to devalue music,
Got
right?
it.
I know I'm slightly going off on a tangent here because I know you were asking me about music NFTs, but it's important to understand this. What
right,
we're trying to do in this space is use frontier technologies like NFTs, like AI, whatever,
right,
to streamline this process and get closer to
right,
fans and allow fans to have something new in this experience, which is skin in the game. The
right,
concept of being part of an artist's inner circle or team or gang or fan club or whatever it is you want to call it,
right,
tribe, but to be so close in with that artist that they're actually able to contact the artist potentially directly
right,
or engage with them, and but most importantly possibly influence the artist with some of those decisions, and
right,
some of those decisions around what the artist does, what the artist, you know, what single the artist puts out, where they tour, the touring structure, what kind of designs or merchandise. There's
right,
all kinds of things around this that is a very interesting concept where you go out to your fans and you actually engage in them to come
mhm,
and be involved because they have skin in the game. It's
right,
worth their while. They actually have potentially a financial reward in having
right,
skin in the game in this
right,
scenario. They might be able to make money out of all of this.
right,
So, you know, NFTs within your armory are part of utilizing this new technology to build these direct connections with your fans that will reward fans, that segment fans and reward them in ways that
right,
we haven't really seen before. And you can't really do with an email or a credit card, which has been the traditional ways that we've
right.
done it.
So I just have a question. Like, can we see it from this perspective that uh, we are trying to give the or take the powers from labels or so-called music producers, like someone who is in the bad light and who is not actually helping the creators, because music producers are again in a sense creators itself, right? Like we are talking about the monetary people who are gatekeeping the industry. So can we see it from that sense that we are kind of taking the power from their hands and shifting it towards the end users itself, because at the end of the day it's normal people like us who are listening to music, and we are giving the
Oh,
opportunity, so we are kind of trying to take the powers from labels or so-called gatekeepers and
no,
shifting it.
no, no.
We're not doing that.
I think it's really important that we think about the, there's a lot of good things about the music industry. There's a lot of
Right,
very passionate people that are
absolutely,
really, really care about music and really
right,
care about developing music. Music is a collaborative
right,
thing. It's a collaborative space.
right,
So on the one hand, yes, we are trying to take away maybe the immoral, historic, contractual business practices that are very one-sided for those
right,
people. But at the same time, we mustn't lose sight of the importance of teams and how
right,
teams are very integral to the making and developing, the
right,
develop, finding and developing and making of great music. I
right,
think, we surround ourselves with very insular technology,
right,
mobile phones, laptops, iPads, whatever. They're really insular technologies. They're great for us to work with and vibe off of. And now, of course, we've got AI agents that we can bounce ideas off of and all that kind of stuff.
right,
But music creatively needs people. It needs a team. Other people matter.
right,
And I think, one of the big problems with the current state of the music industry is that we don't encourage the why it's important to have management, why it's important to have a producer, why it's important to have mastering, why it's important to have a social media manager that you can work with. All these things are really, really important. We've got to find ways of paying them, of
right,
course. Current problem with the music industry is that we don't have that. We haven't grown the pie of the music industry. The music
mhm,
industry is the same value today as it was 20 years ago.
mhm,
It hasn't grown. And yet in that time, we've democratized through laptops, through mobile phones, through the internet, through social media, streaming. We've democratized the making of music. I can now make very comprehensive music, very sophisticated music on my phone. And I can post it straight up to social media, and I can post it straight up to TuneCore and get it on all the streaming platforms, all pretty much for free. It hasn't
Right.
cost me really that much money. So we now have a situation where I think it's around about 160,000 tracks are on Spotify going up a day. And so we've democratized the making of music. In the 70s, a golden period of music making, 72,000 singles were released in the entire decade of the 70s. Today, 160,000 tracks are going up a day. There are now more people making and releasing music than ever before. But the pie hasn't grown. The amount of money in the music industry is the same. So if you've got more people
Got
demanding more money, but from the same pot of money, you get everybody earning less,
right.
apart the top 1% who are earning more than ever before. The Ed Sheerans, the Drakes, the Kendrick Lamars, they're all earning crazy amounts
Right.
because of the way the industry is structured towards bias towards major label artists
Right.
and also those top streaming artists.
That makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Like, the thing is, the way you have shifted the perspective of, like, the way I was asking was, it was like we had a very limited amount of resource and everybody needs to, like, get their earnings from that. So when I look at from that perspective, it kind of turns into that we are taking away power from the labels and, like, diverging it into the hands of individuals. But the moment we change it, like, we're trying to get in more people and expand that resource from where everybody is getting. That actually makes in a lot of sense. That I would say is, in a sense, that we are getting more people to have some personal connection with the artist itself and
Mm.
get that funds into that pool, and then maybe the team of, or however the, like, distribution happens at the back end can be understood. So if you could help us understand, how does this whole NFT function for an artist? For example, TokenTraxx has published lots of uh, artists, their music, they have helped them a lot. I believe the last time I was working with you guys, like, there was Rat Boy getting marketed by TokenTraxx. So if you could help us understand the backside of how does the whole thing works, like, how do we produce it, how is it getting funded, once the NFTs are sold, what are the benefits that the people who have bought the NFTs get. So if you could, like, break that chunk, that would be really nice.
Yeah. I mean, it draws upon the journey that I've taken in the last 5 years. So I got into crypto in 2015 and have been a sort of supporter of crypto ever since. And then in 2020, kind of spurred on by COVID, and looking down, I realized that I always had these ideas of how blockchain technology, AI technology, metaverse technology could work in the music industry.
Right.
And then spurred on by COVID, I thought, well, I'll put my money where my mouth is and I'll start a company which looks to explore all these ideas that I had. So
Right.
TokenTraxx was born. And initially we very much were into the idea of NFTs and collectibles and fans being able to buy into NFTs as part of the marketing, the continuation of the
Right.
marketing and allowing artists to have this more direct thing, all the things I just talked about.
Right.
And so we raised money off of the token. We built our own marketplace. We worked with loads of different artists. My philosophy always from day one was to look at the creative aspects of what this technology could do. For
Right.
me, it was never about a one size fits all kind of concept. There are other NFT music platforms that did, one of ones or a collectible or this. Every project that we did on TokenTraxx was pretty unique, apart from the sort of entry level projects that we would do. We did loads of things. We did things around collectibles, as I say, one of ones. We did also editions, but we did things around generative music and art with my project, the track stems. We did membership programs. We did
Right.
mentoring programs where ownership of the NFT gave you kind of an in with a very successful music manager. We did a bunch of different things that we wanted to experiment with.
Right.
As I said, the creative things that one can do with this technology around stuff like collectability, rarity, fractionalized IP, all this kind of stuff really, really excited me. And I really saw a lot of opportunities around that. What we learned was was that by and large, artists need to make the effort. And unless you're working with an artist who is prepared to put the time in and the energy in, it's not going to work out.
Right.
And secondly, that fans aren't there yet. They're not really, they haven't quite got it.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, we started working on wider than music and started working with all the creative industries, because what we learned was that this technology works on four very specific verticals that are really, really interesting verticals that actually work right across all the creative industries. The first one, as I mentioned, was collectability. And
Right.
we see collecting art, for example, collecting stamps, collecting vintage guitars or Ferraris or whatever, or the Hermes bags, or this. There is a culture for collecting that has
Right.
always been there. It is very specific to a thing or a genre or whatever. It is, everybody does in some way collect something. So being able to attach this digital certificate of provenance to that is a really, really interesting thing. Then for that digital certificate to give you some kind of status within social media or whatever is also very, very interesting. And we're still very much at early stages of understanding the psychologies around that. But status is something that's been a part of a major part of society for forever. So why not have status in the digital domain?
Right.
That's the first one, collectability. The second one is fractionalized ownership. Um, Fractionalized ownership or royalties from something, again, is nothing new. I as a musician have signed away my rights to Sony, to Universal, to EMI, to many different labels over the years and publishing companies over the years. I give them the right to collect my royalties on behalf of me, and they have an infrastructure which allows them to do that. But they also, more importantly, give me money, and that's great.
Right.
What about if we could create fractionalized ownership with our fans? Why sell our music rights to EMI or Universal as it is now? Um, and, when I could sell them to my fans who ultimately, I might not get as much money, but I will get something that's, fantastic.
Right.
So that fractionalized ownership is the second one. The third one is loyalty. Now, again, loyalty is nothing new. Air miles, whatever, cards, charge cards, whatever, store cards rather. Nothing new here. But the ability to be able to own my own loyalty, i.e., own my own engagement
Mhm.
through my through smart contracts, and more importantly, my digital wallet. So my digital wallet is my passport, that whenever I go somewhere and I connect my digital wallet, it can store the engagement that I have. It can store what I do. So I come to you and I'm a fan of yours and I engage with you on many different levels, and all of that gets stored into my digital wallet. When I go to someone else, they go, well, he's a fan of Ashmet and he's done all these different things. I'm going to give him 20% off because he's a baller. So I think that's really, really interesting. And again, we're exploring a lot of stuff around that with
Right.
different projects. And then that's the third one. The fourth one is really interesting as well because it's a new one. We are seeing it's basically authenticated data. Now we're seeing huge amounts, billions of dollars going into LLMs, going into ChatGPT, whatever, blah, blah,
Right.
blah, Gemini, Grok, whatever. And they're training all this data on the internet.
Right.
If I'm a U2, or if I'm a Ferrari, or if I'm, a famous film star or whatever, do I really want LLMs training their data on everything that's on the internet? Wouldn't I prefer to have some authenticated data that I approve, that I say, yeah, this is actually how it was in the studio when I made this album. And I think that we're just beginning to scratch the surface of that. You were already seeing companies like, New York Times and music companies or whatever coming out and going, whoa, hang on a sec, guys. You can't just use our stuff for free. You've got to do deals with us. And authenticating that data through blockchain and through payment rails, automated payment rails, I think is going to be really fascinating. I've made some investments in a bunch of different companies that basically bring music down to attributes that allows LLMs to train them in a way that allows them to then generate royalties off the back of that.
Right.
So all of that kind of stuff is really, really interesting. Those four things: collectability, fractionalized IP, loyalty, and authenticated data, are what really, really work in this space. And How you explore them is entirely up to you. What TokenTraxx now does is it works with many different, everybody from individuals all the way up to
Right.
multinational companies. And we create a bespoke concept. You come to us with an idea, or we go to you with an idea. We create a bespoke concept. We have the technology that we've developed that we build out for it. We also do the strategy and potentially even help out with marketing and stuff like that. It's all about building projects that are going to connect on some
Mm.
level with whatever fan base or consumer base you've got within your brand.
Right.
And that's we're doing, we're working with a fragrance company to do the first Bitcoin fragrance. We're doing working with a bunch of different ticketing agencies around, NFT perks through ticketing. We're working with massive festival companies to create things around their fractionalized IP around their festivals, and all kinds of different stuff.
Right.
And that's really where TokenTraxx lives now, and where I spend a lot of my time is
Right.
working with projects on a bespoke basis, finding really cool ways of doing this. And as I said, it's not just music. In fact, most of the projects we're doing are outside of music now.
Right.
Music's problem is music, is the business itself. And I'm not entirely sure that the music business wants to change. There's a lot of people, sorry, there's a small handful of people, predominantly white men, that are making a shit ton of money out of the music industry as it stands.
Right.
And it's difficult to see how we can break that down. I think the only way we can do it is keep encouraging these concepts of, breaking down the gatekeepers, it being more about skin in the game, understanding what potential there is with new technologies to create new ways of doing things. The more we do that across the board, the more slowly but surely we will change the music industry as
Right.
it's.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you shared great insights, and what I want to know is like if you could also shed some light, like we understand how the music industry works. If you could help me understand how does the artists earn, and if you could just give me a breakdown of the resources, like I can count royalties as one of them from the music that they have produced. Concerts could be another. Uh, what are the other avenues through which an artist can actually earn or is earning at the moment?
It's a really good question, because I think this really comes down to a fundamental moral question, which
Right.
is, if we value music as a society, how are we going to fund it?
Right.
And I actually am struggling to know the answer to that. It's a question I pretty much ask myself every day, and it's
Right.
a question that I try and find the answers to.
Right.
um, I think we fund it in many different ways. The traditional music industry, as I said, it's difficult for any artist to make a living wage out of this. A living wage in the UK is around about, I think, 24,000
Yeah.
pounds a year. Maybe that's around about $30,000 in US. Maybe in the US it's probably more. It's probably about $40,000, because the cost of living is a little higher.
Right.
Europe, India, I'm sure you have your own sort of average wages,
Right.
but then you also have a living wage. What is a living wage? A living wage allows you just, to not live like a pauper. It's what
Right.
is a living wage? And the question is, should musicians earn a living wage? I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but what right do they have to earn a living wage?
Right.
Society decides, the markets decide. And right now, the market has decided that it's not going to pay any more than 11.99 a month,
Right.
if you're lucky. And that's it. That's what, in fact, most people want to listen to music for free.
Right.
So we have to, as a society, decide how we're going to do that. Um, as it stands, the traditional ways of making music are writing songs, which is publishing, recording those songs, which is called master rights, and playing gigs, and selling merch, and then synchronization rights, which is music to picture, so film, TV,
Right.
ads, whatever. Um, and there are many different ways of doing that. I'm not going to go into them now. You can find them all over the internet as ways of doing it. But the
Right.
bottom line is, I think it's very difficult for musicians to make money now. And I think until we can change that situation and find a way of growing the pie, the value of music,
Right.
people. don't think twice about spending $5 a day on a cup of coffee, but they won't spend 11.99 a month on music. Something that, music, more people sign up to music streaming platforms than
Right.
any other cultural or creative force. People love music. We lose our shit to music. We
Right.
care about music so much. We have our favorite song. We have the song we sing at our birthdays. We have the song that we had our first kiss to, or the song that we had our first dance to at our wedding.
Right.
Music is an integral part of everybody's life. What kind of society are we building that doesn't value music? And to
Right.
me, that's a fundamental problem, and we need to find a
Right.
solution to that.
Absolutely. That's more of a capitalism kind of problem, but maybe we can discuss that another time. Like I believe it we are going over the board of time. So I'll just ask you this last question and end it over. So my last question is more or less like if you could help out and if there are any musicians who are watching this, how could they reach out to TokenTraxx and what all kind of assistance can they get from TokenTraxx and how is TokenTraxx or basically if I would break it down, how can TokenTraxx help the individuals or artists who are into this space? And that's it. Like that would be my last question.
Well, I mean, if you'd asked me that question 2 years ago, I would have said, "Yeah, fine. Come and be on our platform." We're not really doing that sort of direct to artist stuff now. We're building other platforms for other companies.
Right.
Um, but that's not to say that there's not a huge amount of opportunity that you can do in this space. The first thing I would fundamentally do is come and listen to my Music Monday Twitter space, which is on Twitter every Monday at 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern US time. Um, that is the longest running regular music and arts Web3 space on Twitter. I've
Right.
been doing it since every Monday since October 21.
That's great.
And the idea of that was always to talk about these frontier technologies. We talk about all kinds of stuff now, but you can come up on stage and ask any questions around stuff like that. My DMs are always open on Twitter. You can ask questions that way. I do believe that there are many, many different platforms now that allow independent artists to really, really flourish. One
Right.
thing I do think is that we spend far too much time and invest far too much currency in social media. I think if you are a musician and or a DJ and you are trying to break out, you've got to think of two things. You've got to think of these two communities that you have in this world. You have your online community, which is the world in theory, but really you have your local community. And wherever you are locally, whatever city or town or village or whatever it is you live in, you need to work on that community first. I would argue that community is more important than your online community. So find a venue, find a place, put a night on, get some mates in to help you out, get some people down, sell some booze so everybody's happy, and play some music and make it a sociable experience. And if people like it, they'll come back the next week and the week after and the week after, and they'll bring their friends, and more people will come down. And then you create a scene, and scenes are very powerful.
Right.
Scenes throughout human history and civilization have always been the backbone of where change comes from. It comes from scenes. It doesn't come from individuals. It comes from scenes. Individuals are a part of scenes. And so, build a scene in your local area. And then, of course, you can use the content from that scene to promote yourself online and build your online community. And they two go hand in hand. They are very much interconnected. If you don't work on your scene around you,
Right.
and at the same time, you're learning to gig, you're learning to perform, you're learning to connect with the artists, you're learning to do mic technique, you're learning to connect with the audience. You're learning, you're honing your craft, as we used to say back in the day.
Right. That was really insightful. Like I'm really thankful to you, Tommy, for joining me for this.